I'm Jasmine Becket-Griffith and I'm a painter, I'm an illustrator, I'm a fantasy artist. I'm originally from Kansas City, Missouri, where I grew up, and when I was about 20 years old I moved down here to Florida. Kind of far away from all my friends and family up in Kansas and Missouri, but I think the weather's a lot better down here, and I also find it more inspirational living down here by the coast as an artist. I started painting like a lot of people probably have when I was very little, probably 3 or 4 years old, and I'd have a little box of watercolors and I'd just kind of mess around and have fun with it. I think where I'm different than a lot of people is I never really stopped. By the time I got to middle school, a lot of my friends kind of stopped doing artwork just for fun. They do it for art class other than that. But I just kind of kept up with it as I got older and spent even more and more time at it. And when I was a very little girl, 5 or 6, I used to kind of go door to door trying to sell my neighbors these awful little drawings of birds and pictures of their houses and things that I wanted to show to people. But when I was a teenager, I think is when I really started taking painting and drawing more seriously. I started seeing it as more as a way I could make a living someday and something I wanted to pursue as a grown-up. And when I was 17, I started my website, my Strangeling.com website, and I started selling my artwork online, and that's where it really turned into a full-time occupation eventually. Well, my family in general have always been very supportive of me being an artist and painting and drawing and making sure I had the time and the quiet to pursue that sort of interest. But I will say in general, my parents weren't specifically supportive of me pursuing art as a career, which I do understand, and I think in general that might be kind of a nightmare for a parent to have somebody who's their child and they're a teenager and they want to go be a fantasy artist for a living, and you would rather they go be a scientist or a doctor or a lawyer or something that you would traditionally see as being a more stable career. I think I've kind of proved everybody wrong who was a naysayer. I think I probably am much happier, and I definitely make more money than I would have done if I'd pursued pretty much any career out there. When I met Matt, I was 17 and I was getting ready to graduate from high school. I was a little bit young for my graduating class, and it was around the time I started dating him more seriously, and he suggested maybe I start up a website. So that is when in 1997 I started my website, Strangeling.com. Strangeling was actually the name I would use when I would play Dungeons and Dragons. That was a character I would, no matter what sort of character it was, I usually named it Strangeling, which is a nickname that Matt gave me when we were dating. It's a combination between strange and changeling. And I set up my website around that time when I was my last year of high school, and that's around the time too that it started. The internet in general, I think, as a venue for selling artwork, as well as just me wanting to be a professional artist, started to be more of a cohesive idea in my head.
Jasmine was always kind of a bit off-center to me. Sometimes when I'd ask her a question, she'd give me a strange response. And after a while, I gave her this nickname, Strangeling. And I think she liked it. She named her website after it, Strangeling.com, and people have really associated the term Strangeling with her creations. And I don't think about it every day, that I gave her that name, but I guess I did, and it just stuck.
As far as pursuing art as a career, I would definitely have to say that Larry Elmore, both personally and professionally, has encouraged me to pursue fantasy art in specific and kind of magical realism as a genre in general as a full-time career and trying to get myself out there. He was the person who convinced me to go to Dragon Con for the first time and do some live events as opposed to just kind of hiding away in my basement and painting and not really showing my art to the world outside of the computer. He was very encouraging, and I'm very glad I listened to him. It's always hard when you ask an artist what sort of genre that they would classify their artwork that it would fit in, because a lot of people don't like to pigeonhole themselves, but I know I do fit in a lot of genres depending on the painting I do. Definitely fantasy. I would definitely put my artwork in the surreal category, probably pop surrealism, kind of a lowbrow sort of thing. It's not trying to be fine art, but I do approach my subjects as being fine art. I treat it the way an old master would if I painted, even though if it's a wonderful little fairy holding a kitty cat or something like that, I like to make it visually pleasing. I like it to look as if it could exist in a three-dimensional plane. But I would say fantasy, definitely gothic, some of my darker stuff. Sometimes I throw in some little steampunk or sci-fi elements. Depends a lot on the piece, but in general I would say fantasy, pop surrealism, magical realism, somewhere around those lines. A lot of my employees are actually family members of mine. I have about half a dozen full-time employees, including both of my sisters. I think I naturally started looking when I needed help, and I knew that there's too much work for me and Matt to do on our own. I just looked at my family because they often were either having babies and wanted to be stay-at-home moms, or they were talented people who I wanted to make use of, or it was people I know I can trust because they're related to me. So eventually I ended up hiring both my sisters, Amber and Kachina, and my stepsister, Sonia, who handles all my website stuff, Matt's sister, Sarah, who does a lot of the jewelry, and she also sews all my dolls and cloth products, and even my mom does sewing for me full-time now, and it just kind of spread out from there. It wasn't done intentionally, it just kind of worked out. It's like, oh, we need somebody to do this, and I happen to know somebody who fits the bill, and they happen to be a sister or a family member of mine. My husband, Matt, is definitely my primary assistant, and without him, I would not be able to do all of the things I do now. It used to be that I would be the person who would get the order from an email on my website. I would go make the print, I'd put it in an envelope, I would ride my bike to the post office, and I would ship it. And by that time, it was halfway past the day, and I'd only have maybe 6 to 8 hours left to paint. When I hired Matt on from full-time, basically, he's the one now who processes a lot of the orders. He does the prints. He also has a lot of good skills as far as preparing artwork for hanging on the wall, such as framing or for stretching canvases, and he does all that sort of work. I just do the painting, I scan it in, I give him the file, and then he puts it together and mails it. So he is definitely a big part of the reason I am able to dedicate 10 to 18 hours now per day for solid painting.
I perform the duties that an artist may otherwise have to do, anything besides not actually painting. Jasmine paints. Jasmine scans in paintings. After that, after she's happy with the scan, she gives a file to me. I make prints. I make canvas prints. I pack up everything. I ship them out. I make deliveries to the galleries. I get the show ready when we do shows, conventions. Her job is to be a painter. My job is to be her assistant.
I've started doing a lot of art shows and conventions every year. I try to limit it to 1 or 2 per month. So typically in the space of a year, I probably do between 10 and 20 shows. I always do some of my favorites. I always do Dragon Con in Atlanta. I do the art show there. I always do MegaCon here in Orlando because I live here. I do a handful of shows at Pop Gallery at Downtown Disney here in Florida. And then for my Disney work, I do a lot of shows at the Wonderground Gallery out in Disneyland in California. It's a fun excuse to travel around the world. I do a couple shows in Glastonbury in England. I do the Whitby Goth Festival in England. It's kind of a way I can pattern my year so that we have a regular travel and vacation schedule, as well as working some actual work and networking and seeing all my fans also. I think as far as what keeps me grounded and level-headed when I do shows, when I do live events, and it doesn't matter if there's a line out the door or if it's a big celebrity sort of hoopla thing. If there, especially at Disney, when there are little girls who come up to me and they'll bring me little coloring book cutouts that they've done of my paintings, or they'll come up and tell me that they have not, they've never met a real live artist, and that's something they would like to do when they get older. And it makes me think of myself when I was that age, and it seems like something that I didn't necessarily have a role model for, so it makes me very happy and keeps me very grounded to think that I could potentially be that for a next generation, maybe, of younger artists. I get asked a lot for advice from up-and-coming artists, and I think the main advice I could give, and I don't know if it's what everybody wants to hear, is that to make sure that you genuinely enjoy making art. I sometimes get emails from people who say, oh, I get tired after about an hour of painting, I can't think of any ideas, my head hurts if I paint too long. What's your advice for being a good artist? And I'm like, well, maybe being an artist isn't the sort of job that you might enjoy. I don't know what to say to people sometimes, but I think if you genuinely enjoy the creative process of it, you'll be fulfilled intrinsically in yourself, and you will enjoy it, and that will make you want to go on and continue doing more artwork. And the fact that you enjoyed creating what you've done, I think, are probably my best pieces of advice, which might sound really obvious, but they're two very basic things I think people should take into account.